Caves are one of the last truly unexplored frontiers on Earth. They're dark, they're silent, and they hold incredible beauty. But what happens when that exploration goes horribly wrong? When the rock that has stood for millennia decides it won't let you leave? Today, we're looking at two horrifying caving stories where the dark became a prison and survival seemed impossible. Be warned, these stories are intense. Our first story takes place on a perfect Saturday morning, July 18th, 1998. Craig Douglas, his sister Jessica, and their friends Buster and Jennifer were standing at the entrance of Keyhole Cave. You know that feeling? The air is crisp, the forest is quiet, and you're just buzzing with excitement for the adventure ahead. They'd been to this 370-foot-long cave before, but had turned back. This time, they were determined to reach the bottom. Keyhole Cave is notoriously tight. It's not a cave you just walk through. It's a winding, suffocating maze. You have to squeeze, crawl, and twist your body in ways that are just beyond normal endurance. The deepest part is 113 feet down, and the final stretch involves a nearly impossible 1-foot-high crawl that leads to an 8-foot vertical drop. The four of them strapped on their headlamps, checked their knee pads, and started the descent. As they moved through the damp, jagged tunnels, the world above just disappeared. The temperature dropped, the air became still, and the only sounds were their own breathing and the scrape of gear against rock. For the first few hours, everything went smoothly. They inched their way through, their muscles burning from the constant strain. Finally, they reached the infamous Paul's Pipe, the last tiny crawl. Craig took the lead. He exhaled and began to worm his way through, feeling the unforgiving rock press against his ribs and hips. It was slow, agonizing work. He was using his legs to push forward, his boots scraping the stone when he reached the edge of the 8-foot pit. He extended his legs, searching for footing, and that's when it all went wrong. His left foot got caught. A rock pinched his boot, stopping him from sliding forward. Annoyed, he shifted his weight to try and free it, but as he moved, his right knee suddenly jammed between two jagged slabs of bedrock. Pain just exploded through his leg. The slabs were loose, which made it worse. They clamped down, putting more pressure on his leg from all sides. He gasped, his heart pounding, trying to jerk his leg free. But that only made it worse. The rock was like a vice around his knee. He tried to breathe through the pain, but panic was setting in. Then came an even worse realization. He was stuck in a dangerous position, angled downward, with his weight pulling against his trapped leg. If he slipped, he would be left dangling over the pit, with his knee taking the full force of his body. His body was half dangling over the drop, his arms pinned by the tunnel walls. Every tiny movement sent fresh waves of pain. The rock felt like it was swallowing him whole. His sister's voice came from behind, and she quickly realized things had gone horribly wrong. For the next 15 minutes, he fought. His friend Miller crawled in to help, but there was no space to work. He grabbed Craig, trying to twist him free, but the position of his knee made it impossible. The more they struggled, the more swollen Craig's leg became. His breathing turned ragged, his entire leg was on fire, the pressure making his knee feel like it was being crushed. To make things worse, all the blood was rushing to his head. He was nauseated, in agonizing pain, and he knew he had to get upright before he passed out. Through sheer desperation, he managed to twist his torso just enough to push himself into a more stable position. It was difficult, but now he had to use all his remaining strength just to keep his head and back up. But his leg was still wedged deep. They knew they needed help. Jennifer, the fastest among them, was sent back to the surface to call for rescue. While they waited, Craig was finding it hard to stay upright, so the others stuffed clothing into the narrow space to give him some support. By the time the first rescuers arrived, Craig had been stuck for over 5 hours. The situation was bad. His leg was visibly swollen, circulation was cut off, and they knew if they didn't get him out soon, he could lose the leg, or worse. The rescue was agonizingly slow. The cave was so narrow that only one person at a time could work on freeing him. They tried pulling. They tried adjusting his position. They even tried lubricating the rock with water and vegetable oil. Nothing worked. Then came a new danger: the cold. The rock was draining Craig's body heat, and he started shivering uncontrollably. Rescuers wrapped him in a space blanket and ran an electrical line into the cave to power a heat gun. It was the only thing keeping him from slipping into hypothermia. As the night dragged on, something even worse happened. The air quality dropped. Rescuers began struggling to breathe. The oxygen levels had plummeted to 16.9%. They were all slowly suffocating. It wasn't just about Craig anymore. Everyone was on borrowed time. They had to rig a ventilation system, pumping fresh air through hoses just to keep everyone alive.
It has now been over 30 hours. Craig was still trapped. His body was shutting down. His leg didn't even feel like it belonged to him anymore, just a mass of pain and dead weight. Rescuers even considered breaking his leg to get him out. Instead, they started to chip away at the rock with drills and air chisels, breaking it away millimeter by millimeter. They worked in shifts, one person at a time, the sound of the drill echoing through the tiny passage. Craig's breathing was shallow. His shivers had stopped, a terrifying sign that his body was reaching its limit. The rescuers refused to let him go. They kept talking to him, reminding him of the light above, of the fresh air, of the people waiting for him. He couldn't speak anymore, but he was listening. And then, finally, after all the drilling, there was a tiny bit of space. It wasn't much, but it was enough for one last, desperate attempt. The rescuers couldn't reach the spot. They had to pass the drill to Craig. After being trapped for more than 30 hours, it all came down to him. He was hanging partially over the pit. His fingers barely responded as he gripped the drill. He mustered every last bit of strength, his arms trembling, muscles burning, and pressed the drill against the rock. His vision blurred, the cave spun, and then something shifted. For the first time in nearly 2 days, his leg moved. With the last ounce of strength he had, he pulled. His leg came free. It was 8:30 p.m. on Sunday evening. The relief was overwhelming, but his leg felt like it was on fire as circulation returned. He had no energy left. The cave had finally let him go. But the nightmare wasn't over. His leg was ruined. It took him and his rescuers over 8 more hours to crawl, climb, and drag himself back to the entrance. At 9:15 a.m. on Monday morning, after 43 hours underground, he finally emerged into the daylight. He was rushed to the hospital, and after emergency surgeries, doctors managed to save his leg. He had faced the worst possible nightmare in that cave, and lived. It's almost unimaginable. If you appreciate these stories of extreme survival and resilience, taking just a second to like this video really helps support us here at Pause Inside. This next story is in some ways even more terrifying. On Sunday, January 13th, 1991, a group of 3 cavers set out to explore Meawell Cave in Alabama. John Mosey, the leader, was experienced, 10 years under his belt. Linda O'Donnell and Charles DeFinger were newer to the sport. Charles, though, was particularly enthusiastic. At 26, he was eager to push his limits. The plan was to descend the infamous 310-foot pit, explore the bottom, and get out. But there was a complication. The cave entrance sat in a stream bed, and recent rain meant water was cascading down into the pit, spraying anyone on the rope. It wasn't ideal, but they pressed on. John had brought a 600-foot rope he'd bought secondhand from some Polish cavers. They assured him it was nearly new and rated for 4,500 pounds. But it was a European rope, different from the American static ropes they were used to. They rigged the rope to avoid the heaviest water spray, but this setup put a straight pull on the bolts, and it meant the rope ran over a critical point, a sharp, projecting ledge about 20 feet down. This spot already had deep grooves from previous use. The descent began. John went first, then Linda. Finally, it was Charles's turn. At 240 pounds plus wet clothes and gear, he was pushing 260. He moved cautiously and descended. By 2 p.m., all 3 were at the bottom. The cavern was massive, but the constant water spray had soaked them to the bone. After about 45 minutes, John decided it was time to ascend. He went first, testing the rope. The climb was grueling, but he reached the top. Linda followed, slower, as the cold and fatigue set in. By the time she reached the surface, she was shivering uncontrollably. John helped her out and told her to wait in the car to warm up. With Linda safe, John returned to the pit to check on Charles, who had just started his climb. John waited at the top. He called down periodically, but the roar of the water made it hard to hear. After about 20 minutes, John grew concerned. He called out again louder, no reply. A sickening feeling started to creep in. John grabbed the rope, expecting to feel the tension of Charles's weight. Instead, the rope was slack. His heart hammered in his chest as he pulled it up, hand over hand, hoping he was wrong. And then, after pulling up about 40 feet, he saw it, the end of the rope. It was severed. For a moment, he couldn't move. The lifeline connecting Charles to safety was gone. Somewhere in that 310-foot blackness, Charles had fallen. John scrambled out of the cave, ran to the car, and told Linda the rope had snapped. They had to get help. They rushed to the main road, flagged down a motorist, and told him to call for rescue. While Linda drove to a supply point to get more rope, she asked the question haunting both of them. What if he's still alive down there? John didn't answer. He just knew they were running against the clock. Back at the cave, John told Linda to wait at the road to direct rescuers. He grabbed the new ropes and headed back into the dark. He rigged the new line, his hands trembling, and began his descent into the abyss. When John reached the bottom, he saw the reality of what had happened. Charles lay motionless, his body twisted in a way that left no doubt. His helmet had shattered. He checked for a pulse, knowing what he wouldn't find. He was gone. Grief and guilt washed over him. He felt like he had failed. He wrapped Charles's body in the sleeping bag and began the weary climb back up. As he ascended, he passed the sharp ledge where the original rope had failed. He could see the fibers of the broken rope still clinging to the edge. This was where Charles's life ended. The recovery operation lasted all night. An investigation later found the failure was a combination of factors. The European rope had a thinner sheath, the sharp ledge, and Charles's climbing technique, a frog system, which likely created a bouncing effect, rhythmically stretching and loading the rope with 500 to 800 pounds of force on that sharp, abrasive edge. At some point during his climb, the rope, weakened by the friction and tension, simply snapped. Caving is always dangerous, but this incident shows how quickly a few small, overlooked details, a secondhand rope, a sharp ledge, a specific technique, can combine into a deadly disaster. These stories are a powerful reminder of the risks involved in exploration. It makes you think about every piece of equipment. This brings me to my question for you. For all the cavers, climbers, or hikers watching, what's the one piece of safety gear you absolutely never, ever leave behind? Let me know your answer in the comments below. Thanks for watching.